Hello, and thanks for joining us for Pact. P is for Peter, that is me. This is Miss Astronaut Cowboy Doctor, that's ACD. If you're interested in supporting us, subscribe and follow on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends about our little politics show as well. If you really want to help us out, become a patron at patreon.com/PeterCoffin, or just click the join button below. Either way, joining gets you into the Discord server, gets you exclusive content, and you get to see some content before everyone else. We stream at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Friday. Thanks, everybody, so much for tuning in. So, what we are looking at is a tweet by Jamal Bauman. Jamal Bauman, I want to quickly tell you who is. He is the congressman nationally for New York's 16th district. He's a former middle school principal. He claims to be causing problems for the status quo, fighting for jobs and education, not bombs and incarceration.
The things that he is advocating for are good things.
Yeah. Jamal Bauman is a Democrat, has 337,000 followers on Twitter, is a fairly popular person in a very Democratic area, New York City, basically media central. What he is saying here is that our education system and standardized testing is racist.
Completely true.
Absolutely.
Right. Let's list off the reasons that standardized testing and even neuropsychological testing and intelligence testing has like incredibly deeply entrenched racial undertones, and not things that like, oh, this is explicitly racist and you can just notice this. One of it is very much or not one of them. All of them are contingent on the intersection between class and race. Much of it consisting in racial and ethnic minorities and the legacy of racism over the past 400 years in the United States. Automatically undermining the resources that somebody has to prepare for standardized testing, to engage in the practice and like style of critical thinking that standardized testing requires. And basically, I think the largest thing is just like the amount of resources that you have to be indoctrinated into a culture where this kind of assessment is something that's common, something that you're used to. And so that's completely true. This is, consisting in its foundation in the racialized legacy of class, and race as a justifying ideology of class. Because I think that Black people, white people, Asian people, Hispanic people are of different species, as this cartoon would suggest, and are inherently unable to perform on these tests, as this cartoon suggests.
So the cartoon in question has a crow, a monkey, a penguin, an elephant, a fish, a seal, and a dog lined up, standing at attention towards a man at a desk. The man is looking upon all of these animals and says, "For a fair selection, everyone has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree." And there's a tree off in the background. So you might wonder, how is this racist? It's demonstrating the idea that the people coming in to do standardized testing are all operating on a different level or a different base of knowledge or a different style of thinking. How is that racist? Well,
it's not doing that. It's saying the problem with our education system is that it is assuming a one-size-fits-all paradigm for individual beings who are categorically different from one another and not the same, that have been embedded within a socioeconomic structure that disadvantages them. It takes away the disadvantage and says, oh, this type of individual who is presenting with this test is inherently, genetically even, different than individuals who can succeed at climbing the tree. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of ideological ambiguity in that. Like if the cartoon were a bunch of people with different tools being told to cut down the tree, it'd be less awful. In fact, I think that would be very good. That would make a lot of sense. And that, it's not that these people are inherently different by virtue of either their own effort, their genome, the categorical classification in which their phenotype presents. It's that they've been provided with unequal opportunities to succeed in that task. That would be a really great comic, I think, to share.
Mm-hmm. Because unfortunately, what you accidentally do when you do it this way, when you make the implication that people are fundamentally different at the base level, is you're ultimately reproducing the same shit that the racists are saying.
You're reproducing the racial paradigm, one, and then you're exonerating the people who have perpetuated the systems that sustain these inequities that are racialized.
This is a perfect example of what the sort of wokeness thing has become. I think it's really important that earlier we mentioned that the intention here is good, and it's even coming from a person of color. Like, it's important to recognize those things. However, this is the kind of hierarchical savior complex stuff that continues to justify neoliberal capitalism. And as this sort of conceptualization of wokeness continues to perpetuate this image that people are different fundamentally and that the way we relate to each other is somehow interrupted by our genetics, even if totally unintentionally, like, which is what I think that this comic is ultimately doing. It's not intentional. Like, very obviously, this is not meant to be some sort of racist thing. Like, again, the point here is against standardized testing, which does actually racially enforce class lines. But instead of highlighting those divides, it obfuscates them by creating this innate separation between the subjects of this dichotomy. It's my belief that woke often falls into this exact trap that is going on in this here thing. It accepts these ideas that marginalized people are essentially the thing that they're trying to protect. This is racism. This is what racism is. Like, here's the thing. A teacher is not teaching a classroom full of people from a different species. A teacher does not have an elephant over here, a penguin over here, a monkey over here, a goldfish over here. No.
The thing that really sticks out to me that's so salient is how it immediately exonerates what's actually going on and perpetuating these inequities. It provides this superficial cover by saying, look at these categorically different beings. I'm saying beings because it's animals, and how standardized testing is unfair on the basis of disproportionately impacting some of these different beings, rather than saying this is a disparity in resources for people who should be able to enjoy the same opportunity, the same mobility, the same resources, whatever. And it just takes away from the entire idea that there is a systemic issue here and paints over it with these people are categorically different and we need to accommodate that. You don't need to accommodate categorically differences between groups that are less genetically different than one another than they are within their own racial group. We don't need to do that. What it is we need to strive for equity and resources and dismantling the base that substantiates those.
Racism is an ideology that helps justify why people of certain quote unquote races are in the positions they are in. It very conveniently justifies class lines. If you think there is a reason that a person is poor, like they're lazy or something, then race helps cement that just hardcore, because racial ideology is telling you that like people of a different race have these essential traits. Laziness could be one. If you buy race essentially as a non-ideological, non-hegemonic construct, you're essentially allowing them to justify class society to you.
Yeah. And that's exactly what this thing does. Too, like, by virtue of a politician who purports like pretty progressive initiatives. So like that sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Like, probably one of the more interesting things about this is if you go down through the replies, you can see like a bunch of conservatives basically talking shit about this because they see an opportunity to talk shit about the wokeness. And people listen to it. And I think that wokeness and this kind of stuff makes this kind of mistake fairly often. I think that you end up seeing these types of well-intentioned, but ultimately not critical portrayals of these types of things. Like Miss ACD said, this ultimately justifies the exact dynamic that it's being critical of. It's ultimately telling you exactly why racism is fine. It's telling you that like people of different races are different things. Like, forget the word woke. The word Democrat comes up here. This is how the Democrats ultimately support racist ideology and hegemony. This is not critical of race. What this is accepting the conceptions of racial ideology and using them to say, oh, we shouldn't do standardized testing. Well, in the racist mind, they see this and all they say in response is, well, all right, let's not do standardized testing. I guess what you will get here is a black test. You'll get a white test. You'll get, it's like the ultimate ending here is segregation. If you follow this logic to its clear conclusion, that's what you get. And that's why this is the problem.
And it kind of, I don't know if I should bring this up, what I was talking about today in the meeting that I was in.
If you can anonymize it in some way, it's relevant.
Basically, I was in a meeting where somebody was saying that PhDs are gatekeeping, which obviously they are.
Yes.
But was criticizing how the applicant pool, the people that we pick from the applicant pool are, they have a lot of research experience, they have very strong grades, they have very strong CVs, they have clinical experience, and how we need to make that not the case in terms of the applicants we pick. That was distressing to me because, one, you should not put somebody in a program like this that doesn't have the wherewithal to do it. And two, it's ignoring the fact that the problem is not that we're picking qualified people to enter into a program. It's the problem of at earlier stages not having those opportunities. I mean, like, I completely, from an affirmative action perspective, I mean, of course, that's something that I'm for. People who are not even equally qualified, but just have an adequate wherewithal or amount of experience to engage in a program this rigorous, enough so that they can contribute to the body of literature in a field. That's great. But like, to criticize the standards that are imposed on an academic pool, I think is silly. And I think that that is circumnavigating the actual issue of, at the undergraduate level, at the secondary and primary education level, these are things that we have to dismantle to provide equity and the abilities to get there.
The issue is, systemically speaking, you can't change any of this stuff from the perspective of the way everything is institutionally set up, the way that profit motives are set up, the way that everything is set up. You have to fundamentally change it if you want to actually make things fair for people. What I am saying is that this tweet with this comic, this is saying that essentially these people cannot climb the tree because they are categorically different, essentially different, which ultimately leads to the idea of biologically different. And it's hard to argue against the idea that different species are biologically different. Again, the liberal viewpoint, the liberal view of liberation and anti-racism, their belief is that, and I think that this is a really unfortunate thing, but I think if you really dig down in, these people are privileged and they think that other people are below them and they think that they need protecting. And I think that that is ultimately the blind spot that leads into this kind of cartoon being the promotion for advocacy against standardized testing. It's a white savior complex.
I think also this probably wasn't the intention of it. I don't think that they're putting out this comic to literally compare different races to different species. If it is a side effect of it, and that is the racialized interpretation of it.
I mean, why would you even put this comic out if you thought it was racist? That's the thing. You wouldn't. You think, oh, I've made a brilliant point. I've done the work. People will get it now, and people will be against standardized testing. But if a person becomes against standardized testing, that's also not enough to change the issue. You need to have a full-blown acknowledgement by the power structure, the problem with standardized testing. And you don't get that when people just see a comic. Capital and the capitalist state benefit specifically from the dynamics that are present now. It's set up a certain way, and they're not going to acknowledge those things. And they've done so much to propagandize, to individualize the fault, that in order to explain how a standardized test might be a problem, you have to have some kind of essential reason that an individual wouldn't do good on it, rather than a class analysis which acknowledges the backgrounds of where people are coming from and the disadvantages that they might face, or just any kind of analysis of power. That's why this kind of comic and ultimately wokeness redirect people away from the actual problem, which is the system, the power structure, those who own versus those who are trying to get by. The thing is I absolutely do not want to discourage people from caring about the fact that standardized testing is meritocratic bullshit. It obviously is. But if you care about that, you can't make an argument along these lines because you're ultimately justifying worse shit. And it was a sitting congressperson. So, yeah, power put this out. Doesn't matter if it was intentionally. But anyways, thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget to click like, click subscribe, enable all notifications, become a patron or member. Links and button below. It's good seeing everybody. Indeed. Take care. Have a nice day.